All right, so let's talk about apparent horizon. As I was describing in the post, I talked about apparent horizon and a physical horizon. What are the differences? Why does it matter? Why is this such an issue when it comes to the curvature of the Earth and so forth and so on? I did some very, some very crude demonstrations of how horizon works with our eyes and perception. This is done in my basement. Again, this is not the most, it's not going to be to scale. There's going to be issues with just stuff being there. I don't have a lot of depth to go further out because I'm limited by the wall. Okay, I can't go out another like 20, 30 feet. However, still in the limited spacing that I have, this still clearly demonstrates how a horizon works with our eyesight. Okay, in this first example, I'm going to use a light at night. So I'm going to shut the lights off and you're going to see what happens. So let's play it. So apparent horizon is right below the text line there. Okay, in the light, when the light's on fully. Now we have the light here. We can see the light. We're going to move it along. You still see it. You can still see it. And then now it vanishes. It's hit the horizon line. Okay, the only reason it shows up again now is because there's items in the background that are raising the light level again, and it's bouncing off those. So this is, again, this is not the best example in the world. I repeat it again to again illustrate the point. You see the light moving on the ground. It continues on, and then it disappears completely. Don't worry about the flashlight above. This is not an argument or an example of the sun currently. There's a different way to show that. Because people might say, oh, you can still see the flashlight above, and I'm not talking about that right now. And actually, if you went further out, eventually that would disappear too, but you would need another probably like a couple hundred feet. Maybe that's too far. So again, that's where that is. I do it again from the opposite side, and unfortunately, due to the angle of the camera here, um, the text, this is using like Windows Video Editor. It's not the greatest thing in the world. I can't move the text really in the position that I want. I checked the camera too, so I understand that that moves slightly. It really doesn't matter because it's all relative anyways. Horizon is relative based on the perception of the observer. Again, I go along here. You see the light. Eventually, now it disappears from view. Okay. I do it 3 times here. Okay, you only see it reflecting in the background because there's a clear like Tupperware container that the light is going to reflect off in the background there. Now, is the light going over the curvature of the Earth? No. Is it hitting the horizon vanishing point? Yes. This is demonstrated very easily on a small scale like this in a basement. Now, if you take the same example and you look out over the ocean or over a longer point of view on the Earth, and you see something disappear and go and reach that vanishing point at the horizon, and then apparently, quote unquote, go over the horizon and it disappears completely from view, the same exact thing is happening. You are witnessing the vanishing point that your point of view or your eyesight reaches at the horizon line, which is an apparent horizon, not a physical horizon. This is where an item will disappear. Now, depending on the size of the object, like a building, a large boat, etc., certain objects will take longer to fully disappear. Now I'm going to use physical objects with the lights on. First, we take a coin. We slide the coin along the terrain. You see it go further and further away. It's barely visible at this current point, almost invisible. I think at this point you literally can't even see it. And eventually it just completely disappears out of view. Maybe if you zoomed in really, really, into that, you might be able to pick it up. And then now I take an object that's a little bit larger, a pen, has a bit more height to it, a bit more length. Again, we're going to slide it along the terrain. It's going to move away from us. There you see it almost kind of disappear. You can see it there, but it is barely visible. And then I'm lining it up next to the coin there. Okay, but obviously you see it go further and further away, hitting the horizon line. and it starts to disappear. Now we take a much larger object. Again, this is not to scale, so this is going to be poorly executed, but it still represents the issue of horizon. You see this item start to get smaller and smaller as it leaves, moves away from you, and then hits the line up on the horizon. I know there's a carpet on the right. I understand that that occults or obstructs your view a little bit, but I want to pause it. This is basically representative of what the horizon is doing in reality. Now, if you go out again to actual scale, or if I had a better way to do this to scale, let's say I had another 20, 30, 40, 50 feet behind me, and I could move these objects further down, further away, they would disappear absolutely, completely behind the horizon line. Are they going behind the curvature of the Earth? No, they're going behind the apparent horizon of your limitation of view from your perspective as the observer. Then they disappear from view completely. Now you might beg the question, yes, but I can see everything else in the foreground. I can see the DDR pad, I can see the brown radio, I can see the table, I can see the right aid bag, I can see a bunch of other items. Correct, you can. Why? Because they're larger. You have to go further away for them to eventually reach that horizon line and disappear because they're larger objects. This is, I know I'm stating kind of the obvious, but there's a reason for that. Now, if I had another 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet, and I could go all the way down and all the way back away from the camera, everything eventually would disappear out of view. And you could do this on a limited scale before the supposed quote unquote calculations of the Earth curvature can even come into effect at all. So if you can do this on a small, demonstrably minute scale where there is no earth curvature from the beginning of my basement wall to the front wall, okay, or it's going to be so minute that it's going to be literally infinitesimal and non-applicable at all. So it doesn't matter, okay? This is a flat plane. If you take objects and you move them along a flat plane, they are going to eventually disappear, hitting the vanishing point of the horizon. Again, you can demonstrate this a lot better in a long hallway in a building. Okay, you go to like a hotel, a convention center, where you have a lot of space and you can look way down and you can take an object and you can move it all the way. You can even take people at that depth or range rather, and somebody could be walking away from you. Eventually, they're going to get smaller and smaller and hit that horizon line. And if you go out far enough, they will eventually disappear from view. And this would be only several hundred, maybe 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet, depending. Um, you can do this to a smaller scale, and again, it depends on the size of the object because that is, of course, relevant. And again, distance is relevant. So you have to take that all into account. But again, this demonstrably can prove to you that horizon is not based on curvature. Horizon is based on the apparent horizon of the perception of the individual or the perceiver or the observer. It has nothing to do with curvature. It has everything to do with what you are perceiving relativistic from your perceptional point in reality, or AKA where you're standing in any space, 3D space, left, right, center, wherever you are. You can be way above the earth, you can be at ground level, you can be on a building, you can be underneath sea level, depending on where you are, like in a valley. And the only curvature you will ever experience will be obviously the terrain of the earth, which obviously exists. So you do have hills and valleys and other things that come into play. So will it be minute examples of some kind of curvature at times? Yes. Can you have a physical horizon at times? Yes. But is it always there? No. You only have a physical horizon when the terrain adequately meets that expectation, like a hill or a valley and other minute differences in the terrain of the earth moving up and down depending on because the terrain is not perfectly flat. Nobody is arguing that either. So this is why it is incredibly difficult to convince me that there is a curvature to the earth if you're using the argument of the horizon, because the horizon is not an argument to support curvature. The only way you can support curvature is you have to independently verify curvature absent horizon perception. If you cannot do that and demonstrate that, then there's no argument for curvature and there's no proof of it. Now you might say, but there are calculations. Yes, there are calculations. Those calculations, unfortunately, are inadequate. They do not meet the expectations of what we observe in reality. Why? Because of, again, the examples I just laid out. Crudely implemented, not to scale, not perfectly executed, I could reproduce these again under better conditions. I could find somewhere else to do it or remove some of the terrain. I try to do it to the left of the carpet so that you don't say, oh, but the carpet is obstructing my view. Although in reality, you have to realize that a lot of things can do that. They will obstruct your view, like waves in the ocean or other aspects of terrain. So in reality, no terrain is perfectly flat. So that is kind of okay. But again, I was trying to do it to the left of it so that you're not um, getting obstructed by the carpet because it's a little disingenuous if I go, oh, but the car, you know. However, what's interesting to notice is if you look out toward that radio and some other parts of the horizon, even now where it's paused and you can't see anything, you notice that the horizon, you see that the skyline, okay, I know that there's no skyline, but picture that entire foreground being the sky and then the entire gray being the ground meeting it, and it's converging inward, okay? So the top's coming down, the bottom is going up. Eventually, if I had another, 50, 100 feet, this would eventually all converge down into a focal point, hitting the vanishing point at the horizon line. All of this would eventually disappear. And again, eventually you just would not be able to see any of it. Okay. Now, if you take a much larger object or we get to actual realistic scale, then yes, you would need like several hundred thousand, 2,000 or miles at that point, like in reality. So again, this is why I have issue with curvature arguments, because there is no evidence of curvature from our observable reality. That's it. See ya.